Okay, well, greetings everybody. This is Sabbath time, and today is the 7th day of March 2015, and the 15th day of the month of Adar. Passover is now just about, well, let's see now, 1, 2, 3,
7 from 34.
4 weeks, 4 weeks away. Approximately 1 month till the Passover. And this past week, it has been the 14th and 15th of Adar is the Feast of Purim. So today is the second day of the Feast of Purim according to God's true new moon calendar. The Jews said that ended yesterday, but by the Jewish Hebrew new moon calendar, today is the 15th of Adar and the second day of the Feast of Purim. Now, Purim is a feast that was established in the book of Esther to be celebrated by the Jews for all time because of the deliverance of God's people from the hand of Haman the Agagite and the Amalekite, who was high up in the government of King Xerxes, the richest king in the ancient Persian Empire. And the story, of course, there of the book of Esther, it's a story of mystery and suspense because the whole Jewish people were in danger of being wiped out in a bloody pogrom at the hands of this Haman, who got permission from the king to destroy all the king's so-called enemies. And he said the Jews were the enemies of the empire, that they were different from all other people, and that they should be destroyed, and King Xerxes gave his approval to that heinous plan. It's like he was the Hitler of his day, or Haman was, and sought to exterminate and eradicate and annihilate the Jews, as Hitler did during the great Holocaust of World War II. And of course the tables were turned when God intervened, when Esther, the queen, who was a Jewish most beautiful woman, one of the 7 most beautiful women in all the world, according to Jewish tradition, one of the 7 most beautiful since Adam and Eve, and she had stolen the heart of King Xerxes, and she approached his throne with the golden scepter, and he received her, and she'd been fasting 3 days and 3 nights, and all the people, all the Jews and the empire were fasting along with her for God's intervention, for God's protection, that she might find grace in the sight of the king and favor. And so she approached the throne, he gave her grace and favor, and subsequently, you read the story, Haman was hanged on his own gallows, which was 60 feet high, and his family was hanged and killed along with him. And all the Jews were protected, and they were given the right to go slay all of their enemies on those dates of Adar 14 and 15. And it's an amazing story. And the ironic thing is, you know, King Xerxes came to power in 485 BC. 485 BC, before Christ, before the Common Era. And if you count Jubilee years, a Jubilee year is every 50 years. And if you count 50 Jubilee years, 50 times 50 equals 2,500 years. And if you count 2,500 years from 485 BC, when Xerxes began his reign as the full king of the Persian Empire, it brings you to the year 2015, this very year. And strikingly enough, history is repeating itself, and now we have a new Persian Empire, so to speak, end-time world empire, being led by the United States of America, the last great superpower. And so what happened during the days of Purim, or just before the days of Purim this year? Prime Minister Netanyahu came before the U.S. Congress and Senate and spoke of the dangers of the new Persian Empire, Iran, threatening to conquer the world and destroy the state of Israel, and the United States with their bloodthirsty oaths and their vicious anti-Semitism and their hatred for America. And he came to warn the U.S. people and the Congress about the dangers posed by this new treaty that President Obama wants to sign off and create with modern-day Iran, modern-day Persia, to allow them to proceed forward, to pave the way for them to develop the atomic bomb and the hydrogen bomb and nuclear weapons without restraint after a period of a certain number of years. There'd be no holds barred, Katie bar the door, and they can have their nuclear weapons with the blessings of the West and Obama and Europe. And that bodes great danger for the world and great danger for Israel. And it is a shocking change and a shocking about face in the future and the political destiny of America and the world. Brethren, we have entered the time of the end and the time of the Great Tribulation. We have entered that time. And as a man wrote me recently in an email letter, he was reading my article, The 12 Signs of the End Times, which was written back in 2014. And I think it was a 12th sign that I mentioned there. I mentioned that there would be 10 years of tribulation altogether. And that the 10 years, I estimate, started with the re-election of Barack Obama in 2012, in 2013 when he took office for the second term, which is when the warning went forth, so to speak, pictured by the Feast of Trumpets, the day of Yom Teruah, the day of crying out. We were crying out to people about the dangers being posed by that man and that administration, and the American people elected him anyway. And the Great Tribulation, in a sense, the 10 years of tribulation, typified by that to the Smyrna church in Revelation chapter 3 and verse 10, began. God said, "You shall have 10 years of tribulation, but be faithful unto death." Well, I would say the Great Tribulation of the 10 years began in 2012-2013 with Obama's second term, and the first 3 years of that tribulation would be more invisible. Pictured by the 10 Sephirot of God, the first 3 Sephirot are invisible, internal qualities. But the last 7 are visible and external. And they are defined by the parts of the human body, the 7 parts, the head and the torso and the arms and the legs and the feet and so forth. 7 Sephirot, 7 emanations, 7 picturing 7 years. The first 3 hidden Sephirot picture the first 3 hidden years of tribulation. But the last 7 Sephirot, the last 7 years, pictures manifest tribulation. Well, 2012, 13, and 14, and now we're in 2015. This is the end of the invisible years of tribulation, where the framework and the groundwork was being laid, and now we are entering the time of the external, visible tribulation. And we're seeing it multiplying around the world, in ISIS, in the Far East, throughout the Middle East. It's exploding. And the riots in America, the race riots, the dangers are mushrooming, and they are catching fire with incendiary brilliance. The dangers are escalating, and Americans are clueless. We are very much like the Jewish people in the days of Haman and Queen Esther in ancient Persia. The Jewish people have been assimilated into the Persian Empire, and they felt confident, and they felt secure. They saw no dangers on the horizon. And then this Haman came along, and suddenly they were threatened with destruction. I've got the note on that I wanted to read to you today, but I guess I'll come to it when I get to it. That's the story. And when I do, I will mention it. But it just so happens that this year, 2015, is going to begin with a bang, not a whimper. And just before the beginning of the year, we're going to have an upcoming solar eclipse on March the 20th, about 8:50 in the evening, which in God's calendar is the next day, because his day begins at sunset. But March 20th will be a solar eclipse, plunging the United Kingdom and Europe into total darkness. That begins the year. And then this will be the biggest solar eclipse since 1999. Nearly 90% of the sun's rays will be blocked out in parts of Europe. 3 days later, well, no, let me say that on March 17, Israel goes for their national elections to see who will be the ruling party and the next prime minister. Will Benjamin Netanyahu regain the throne and remain prime minister? Or will the subversive tactics of Obama lead to his loss? The fateful day is March 17, and 3 days later is the solar eclipse, which is a great sign, according to the Jewish rabbis, for Gentile nations. Lunar eclipses are signs to the people of Israel, who are characterized as the moon. And there's going to be a total lunar eclipse April the 4th, which is the day of the Passover, the very night of the Passover. We'll be celebrating the Passover Saturday night, April 4, 2015, and there will be a blood red moon total eclipse on that day, Passover Day. These eclipses, brethren, are signposts. They are significant. God says that He set the sun, moon, and stars in the heavens for signs and for seasons, and days and months, and times and years. But they are a sign And both of these signs, a solar eclipse on the day just before or beginning the new year, the Hebrew year, and the blood moon total eclipse on Passover, ought to make us wake up and pay attention. That something is brewing, something is preparing. Great evil is coming upon the world, and we need to be ready for it and put our faith in God and keep our eyes on Christ. In quietness and confidence, God says, will be your strength. And how can we be quiet, have our hearts quieted, and remain calm? By keeping our eyes on Christ and by staying buried in the Word of God, studying His promises and His revelation. Now, along this line, WorldNet Daily had an article recently that the war that's occurring in the Middle East today, despite the denials of Barack Obama, it is a religious war. A war of faith fighting faith. Obama recently spent days at the White House having a summit meeting, saying in his mind that the U.S. is not at war with Islam. And he wants to protect the Muslims from being blamed for the acts of Muslims in the Middle East. He doesn't want Americans to condemn Muslims when the Muslims are starting a jihad, a war for supremacy, a religious war, a bloodbath in the Middle East, killing Christians, cutting off their heads, crucifying them to a stake, and even killing, raping, murdering, and butchering small children. ISIS fundamentalists, Muslim fundamentalists. And Obama says it's not the Muslims, and he refuses to call them Muslim. And yet that's what they say they are, that's what they tweet that they are, and claim to be. Now, who are we going to believe? They admit it. A number of Middle East experts, the article says, contend that it's clear that the motivation of the people who use these tactics, like ISIS, of beheading, crucifixion, burning at the stake, and slaughter, in order to instill terror in their opponents, and to seize territory in the name of Allah, they are Muslims. It is religious. There's no doubt about it. How long are we going to keep our heads buried in the sand and ignore the truth? The blatant truth. How long are we going to listen to the liars in high places who try to deceive us and tell us there's no wolf there, there's no wolf at the door, you don't need to be worried, just stay calm, we'll take care of you. Trust Uncle Goody, who hands out the candy and the food stamps. Sam. You don't need to worry.
Sam. Uncle Sam.
Uncle Sammy. I call him Uncle Sammy. Okay. David Curry of Open Doors USA told WorldNet Daily, and he's worked for decades in the Middle East, he said, these people have a religious motivation. They are attacking Christians. Their goal is to eliminate Christianity and faith in their caliphate and beyond. They want to get rid of Christians and the Christian religion. That's their goal. That's their objective. That's what they're attempting to do, he said. And so they released a video showing members of the Muslim Brotherhood beheading 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians on a beach in Libya, which went viral around the world. A horrendous video. they are emboldened by the lack of response from Obama, who just says, well, it's not religion. Don't worry about it. And goes to play golf. When people are being massacred and beheaded, what does Obama do? He goes on another golfing trip. Kind of like Nero, who played his fiddle when Rome burned to the ground in the 1st century. We have a modern-day Nero in the White House. At the same time, another WorldNet Daily article, they're one of the best sources to keep up with world news today. Homeland Security Chief Jeb Johnson says that a Somali-based terrorist group is encouraging independent actors to carry out attacks in Western countries, such as the Mall of America in Minnesota. But Homeland Security Chief Johnson failed to mention the fact that the United States continues to import hundreds of high-risk Islamic refugees from Somalia every month. Isn't that amazing? Here are these Somalians, which is a terror-run country, are sending refugees, so-called, to the U.S., and we're welcoming them with open arms, and they may well be terrorists in disguise. A fifth column of intruders, a modern-day Trojan horse, getting ready to attack American malls throughout the country. The State Department of the United States has a refugee resettlement program and has placed more than 100,000 Somalis in U.S. cities since the early 1900s. Early 1990s, I mean. Just 20 years ago. In the past 20 years. More than 800 new refugees from Somalia arrive in the United States every month, says Refugee Resettlement Watch. The constant influx has earned parts of Minneapolis the nickname Little Mogadishu. Minneapolis, Minnesota, parts of that are now called Little Mogadishu because of the Somalian occupation. You know, the question has often come up in the past, and there's a lot of debate and controversy over it. And that's the question is Obama himself really a Muslim? And of course, I have said in the past, yes, it's obvious that he is. If we just open our eyes and look at the evidence, his whole family is Muslim. His father was a Muslim. His stepfather was a Muslim. He was reared in Jakarta, Indonesia, and then went to a Muslim school as a young boy. He grew up thinking like a Muslim. He says the Muslim call to prayer to him is one of the most beautiful sounds on earth. And he wears a ring, or has worn a ring for decades, which says, praise to Allah, glory to Allah. The words of a Muslim prayer. So if he's not a Muslim, what in the world is he? He's certainly not a Christian. There's no doubt that he has and has leaned favorably toward the Muslims ever since he's been president. He's anti-Jewish, anti-Christian, and pro-Muslim. That's a fact. But the article I'm reading says Obama and the Muslim Gang Sign by F.W. Burley from the American Thinker. And he asks the question, is President Obama a Muslim? A lot has been written about this, he says, but if photographs speak louder than words, Then a photo taken at last August's U.S. African Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C. might shed considerable light. And there's a picture here, a photograph of the African leaders meeting in Washington, D.C. And in the middle of them is Barack Hussein Obama flashing the Muslim Shahada, which is the signal with the index finger raised up, signifying Allah is the only God. And that's a sign that Muslims use, and Muslim terrorists use, in fighting for Allah. It's the Muslim Shahada. The Associated Press took the photograph as the African dignitaries joined Obama, who hosted the summit in the State Department auditorium for a group photograph. The photo was published in the Britain's Daily Mail. And it was the only use ever of that photo. The Shahada is a Muslim affirmation of faith. Says the article, when believers stick their index finger in the air, they demonstrate they are partisans of Muhammad's God concept. They affirm their belief in Muhammad's claim that he was the interface between God and man. Only Christ is the interface between God and man. No one else can bring us salvation, none other than Jesus Christ, Yeshua the Messiah. But Muslims affirm their belief in Muhammad as the intermediator, the one who goes between, the interface between God and man, when they raise their index finger in the Shahada. By doing that, they demonstrate that they are part of the Ummah, which is the exclusive trans-tribal super tribe of believers in Muhammad, which he began 1,400 years ago. With Obama's forefinger sticking up in the air in the photograph, he affirms his membership in this super tribe of Muslim believers. Seeing him do that in another photograph, it says the reaction of Togo President Faure Gnassingbe, as he saw Obama sticking his forefinger in the air, is less approving. Through looking at his face, you can read the mind of this Sorbonne and George Washington University educated leader, the leader of Togo. His mind is screaming, "You gotta be kidding," as he saw Obama's fingers stuck in the air. In another photograph, it's a car with ISIS fighters inside, flashing the same sign, the Shahada sign, with their forefinger raised in the air and masks over their faces. ISIS fighter displays the gang sign. To Muslims, the extended forefinger is symbolic of the fundamentalist belief in Islam, that there is one God only, and Muhammad is his messenger. That's what they're saying. And when Obama extends his forefinger in the air that way, that's what he is saying quietly. But who knows? I mean, who is educated and aware of the meanings of these signs? It's a secret, like a secret hand signal. The Muslims know. They recognize one another. Says the article, the finger in the air was a position statement brazenly stated. His entire administration has been a promotion of Islam at home and abroad. And just cataloging the evidence of that fact would fill a book. Obama has made this country, America, cozy for Islam. He has ordered NASA to make Muslims feel good about themselves, and he calls the ISIS victim, Peter Kasig, by his Muslim name, which he adopted in hopes of saving his life. Says the writer, if only Obama's coziness with Muslims were only limited to such gestures. But from the very beginning of his administration, he labored to topple the strongman governments that kept a lid on Islamic extremism in the Middle East. He labored to topple Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Yemen, and he succeeded. Overthrowing the Syrian government was another part of his program. Not yet achieved, but still possible. The methodology of each was a tactic from old school radicalism. Stir up domestic trouble that triggers a crackdown, then use the reaction to discredit the government and as a pretext for stirring up greater cycles of trouble. And it worked in Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt, and Yemen. Says the writer, Obama is comfortable with Islam's extreme. He arms such people throughout the Middle East with armaments. He has let them into our government in America. Our government is riddled with Muslims. Franklin Graham tried to tell that to Bill O'Reilly in an interview this past week. And Bill O'Reilly questioned him and said, well, can you give me names? And Franklin Graham said yes, he could, and he sent Bill some names later in the week. And 3 of the names Bill analyzed, or had his staff analyze, and said, well, yeah, they're Muslim, but they're low down on the totem pole. They don't have that much influence. But he didn't look at all the others. What about Valerie Jarrett, Obama's #1 advisor and mentor? She's a Muslim from Iran and loves her Muslim faith. You know, people are willingly blind and they're going to stay blind. And if the blind lead the blind, Christ said, they both fall in the ditch. And America is being led by blind men. Obama has blinders on. He doesn't want to see the truth. Obama supported the Muslim Brotherhood's Mohammed Morsi in Egypt as a replacement for Hosni Mubarak, a staunch U.S. ally, an enemy of the Muslim Brotherhood. Well, since he was the enemy of the Muslim Brotherhood, he was Obama's enemy. And Obama helped get rid of him. Obama threatened and bullied Egypt when a massive revolt replaced Morsi with a religious moderate. And America withdrew and aid and bullied Egypt as a consequence. Look at the fruits, brethren. Christ said, you shall know them by their fruits, by their actions, by their deeds. The article says, in conclusion, there's nothing in Obama, in his head, that is American. He is an antithetical American, the polar opposite of America's values, which he routinely undermines and trashes. He is an unabashed member of the trans-tribal super tribe of Muhammad, created 1,400 years ago. He is one of the Ummah, not of America. He says the Muslims are very important in American history, and that's a flat-out deception and a lie. You know how the Muslims were very important in early American history? Because they were the Barbary pirates of North Africa and Tripoli. They attacked American shipping in the Mediterranean and took Americans captive and held them hostage in the days of Thomas Jefferson until we sent the fleet and the Marines to deal with the situation. They were our enemies. They were not part of America. So the letter writer concludes saying, "It is evident that you have been had, America. Have you ever been had?" Meaning we have been so deceived, so blinded, that we are in dire straits, deep trouble. Obama makes the Islamic State finger salute before the African leaders in a White House summit. American Muslim Jakeem Nolan, who beheaded his co-worker Colleen Hufford in Oklahoma, is shown in another picture making the Islamic State finger gesture with the extended index finger. It's a sign of terrorism, a sign of radicalism, a sign of Muslim faith, which is a violent political, religious faith of hatred. There's another picture of another Muslim radical of ISIS in Iraq making the Muslim gang sign, and behind him on a fence are the chopped off heads of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 men. Their heads stuck on poles behind him. You call that a faith? You know, that is satanic. They are worshiping Satan, the devil. The God Allah is not the God of the Bible or the supreme deity. He is a fake God, a false God, whose name is Satan, or used to be Lucifer, the false light bringer, the God of this world, the prince of the power of the air. In another picture, a Fox News headline, February 24, 2015, says ISIS push to wipe out Christians. And it's a picture of about 20 or 30 ISIS volunteers, murderers, with their arms raised in the air, with their forefingers extended, every one of them, the sign of Allah, the sign of the Ummah, the sign of the Caliphate. And when Obama himself flashes the one-finger sign before the African delegates, brethren, we ought to get the picture. We need to wake up. It's the gang sign. It's a sign of their gang. The article concludes saying, the Caliphate was resurrected last year by ISIS, only it is not in the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood, not yet anyway. However it came about, the Caliphate was Obama's creation, and he has only half-heartedly pushed back against it. We gave them all their weapons. And the ones we didn't give them, they seized from military storage sites in Iraq. And now Obama has asked the U.S. Congress for authorization to use military force against what he created. What is Obama up to with this, he says? And everything he does, mischief is in the purpose. What mischief does he intend now? And that is an ongoing question. What is Obama up to? Well, I'm going to show you what I think he's up to a little bit here today, because this explains why he is negative toward Benjamin Netanyahu and refused to even talk to him when he came to speak before Congress, and made all kind of ridiculous, lame-brained excuses. But he invites Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, and he speaks to Iran and wants to make a treaty with Iran, the bitter enemies of Israel, and our own bitter enemies. He's up to something. Something no good. The old saying goes, something evil this way comes. Something evil is in the wings and in the wind. A new book by Joel Richardson, a best-selling book called The Islamic Antichrist, was published in 2009, and the book is now out in paperback. And in it, Joel Richardson says, "We are living in an atmosphere 1,000 times more foreboding than anything we saw before World War II and the Holocaust. The world today is 1,000 times more foreboding and threatening than right before World War II, when Hitler was on the march in the Sudetenland and throughout Europe." Richardson says Islamic radicals believe they're ushering in the end times, and they're gearing up for a final assault on the state of Israel. What's worse, says Richardson, President Barack Hussein Obama almost seems to be on their side. That's what he said. In times past, he said, you could chalk up Obama's actions as incompetence. And that's what a lot of the people on Fox News say. They kind of scratch their heads and look kind of bizarrely befuddled to say, well, what's the matter with that president? Why is he doing that? He appears incompetent. He's an amateur. They can't get it. They're puzzled. Joel Richardson says in times past you could chalk up Obama's actions as incompetence, but it has now literally gotten to the point that giving him the benefit of the doubt means that he's just insane. The only alternative is that he is evil. Which is it? Is he insane, incompetent, foolish, or is he evil incarnate? Look at the fruits. Look at the evidence. Keep on looking. Don't take your eyes off the ball. And you will see that his life is full of subterfuge, lawlessness, and lying. He is the great liar-in-chief in the White House. Everything he does is tinged. Everything he does is tinged with falsehood, deception, mendacity. He lies like a fish. Says Richardson, there is clearly prophetic significance in that Netanyahu came to the United States at Purim, a holiday that celebrates the Jews' deliverance from the Persians. And our president is functioning as a supporter of the Haman of our age, if not being a Haman himself. Joel says, I'm not a pessimist. I believe in the power of prayer. I'll pray that America will repent and that Obama will be removed from office, either through elections or sooner. It's gotten to the point where his position in office is borderline existentially threatening to our closest ally in the Middle East, Israel. And he is existentially threatening not only to Israel, but to the well-being of Americans themselves. That means you and me, brother. That means you and me, sister. We have met the enemy, as Pogo said, and he is us. He is our president. The tribulation, I say, brethren, has begun. I'm not saying whether it's the last 7 years has begun, but the final 10 years of tribulation began, I think, in 2012, 2013. This is 3 years later. So I'd say we have about 7 years to run. The Great Tribulation, and the last 3.5 years will be the worst. And it's coming up fast. According to former Navy SEAL and FBI agent Jonathan Gilliam, World War III has broken out. Unfortunately, says Gilliam, the world does not yet acknowledge the fact that it is now in a life or death struggle with terror groups like the Islamic State. Said Gilliam, this is the first unconventional world war we've ever had. It is World War III. Unfortunately, the world hasn't figured that out yet. By saying that, Gilliam was agreeing with King Abdullah of Jordan, who's now taken Jordan into the fight against ISIS. Abdullah said last Sunday that the fight to defeat ISIS is a third world war by other means. If terrorists keep going the way they are going, the roots are going to be able to spread all around the globe to a much greater extent than they are right now, said Gilliam. The terror group Boko Haram, related to ISIS, is now producing its own propaganda videos and posting them on the internet, just like ISIS is, with its gruesome beheading videos. And using 1,400-year-old tactics that date back to Muhammad himself, they're launching their terror across now the World Wide Web and the internet. It's ironic that Obama is playing footsie with the Iranians while he is setting the stage for a clash, the first major clash in the 66-year history of the U.S. with our ally Israel in the Middle East. Obama himself is setting the stage for a historic and painful showdown, not with Iran, not with our enemies, not with ISIS, but with our best friend and ally, Israel. President Obama is signaling that he's ready to give the Iranian leaders what they want most, a nuclear weapon, paving the way for them to gain nuclear weapons with unlimited controls. In the meanwhile, he turns his back on Israel, on Netanyahu, and will not talk to him. Unless it's on his own terms. And just to show you how befuddled and damnable American foreign policy is, approved by the State Department and the Obama administration. Steve Watson in InfoWars on March 2nd, 2015 reports that Iraqi forces, that is, forces in Iraq, are claiming the United States is supplying ISIS with weapon drops. Iraqi forces have once again sensationally charged that the U.S. military is purposefully dropping weapons for terrorist militants in the western parts of Iraq. The Iranian Fars news agency says a group of Iraqi popular forces known as al-Shabaab shot down a U.S. Army helicopter that was carrying weapons for ISIS in the western parts of al-Baghdadi region in Al-Anbar province. The claims come on the heels of reports last week that the Iraqi army shot down 2 British planes, also delivering weapons to the Islamic State. The current government in Baghdad is receiving daily reports from security forces in Anbar province about flights airdropping weapons to ISIS. The reason for the drops, says the legislator, is to prolong a chaotic situation in Anbar province, stirring up chaos. Last week they released a video which claimed to show a U.S. Chinook helicopter dropping 2 boxes full of weapons for ISIS by flying in at a low altitude. You know, how do you make this stuff up? How bizarre can you get? Fomenting strife, providing weapons to the enemy. Like Pogo said, we have met the enemy, and he is us. Going on, another report I'm going to share with you. This is something I really hadn't heard, I guess, but it was from in 1914. President Barack Obama last year thwarted an Israeli military attack against Iran's nuclear facilities in summer of 2014. How did he stop the attack? He threatened to shoot down Israeli jets before they could reach their targets in Iran. So said a Kuwaiti newspaper, cited by the Bethlehem-based news agency Ma'an. In the wake of Obama's purported threat to Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was said to be forced to abort the attack. The Israel National News published an account of the report from Al Jazeera. It said that Netanyahu government decided to attack Iran sometime in 2014, soon after Israel learned and discovered that the United States and Iran were involved in secret talks, which they were hiding from the Israelis, about Iran's nuclear program. And they learned that the U.S. and Iran were about to sign an agreement behind Israel's back. This was last year. The report claimed an unnamed Israeli minister who had good ties with the Obama administration disclosed the details of the attack plan to U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, and that Obama then threatened to shoot down the Israeli jets before they could reach their targets in Iran. Can you imagine the chutzpah? Don't mess with Obama. He would shoot down the planes of our best allies in the Middle East to preserve his own secret agenda. Interestingly to me, former U.S. diplomat Zbigniew Brzezinski, who campaigned for Obama in 2008, himself called on the president to shoot down Israeli planes if they attack Iran. Brzezinski was National Security Advisor to former President Jimmy Carter, a real left-winger. Well, those things are pretty devastating. But in case you want to know the nature of the beast that we're fighting, the nature of Islam, Wally Shobat, Shobat.com, reveals the shocking, horrible, nasty truth about the Muslim faith and religion. And brethren, we need to know the enemy. One of the great cardinal points of warfare is know thine enemy. Know who you're dealing with. Then you'll know why Obama is in favor of the enemy. Why he countenances and is bringing thousands and hundreds of thousands of Muslims over to this country, America, disguised as refugees. He's changing the face of America without our understanding it. Wally Shobat, Theodore Shobat, says Islam, here's the facts of the matter, and here's the evidence. Islam is a homosexual cult. It wants to bring the world a homosexual pagan empire. ISIS is a bunch of homosexual anti-Christian murderers. They are the purest form of the homosexual agenda. And they are just evil and anti-Christian. Just as evil as the reprobate sodomites of ancient Sodom. A recent report reveals that ISIS officials have homosexual sex with other men in their tents. The report said in a joint statement released August 13, 2014, two senior United Nations officials spoke out against ISIS's barbaric acts of sexual violence and savage rapes of Iraqi minorities. The United Nations officials said, "We are gravely concerned by the continued reports of acts of violence, including sexual violence against women, teenage girls, and boys belonging to Iraqi minorities." one detail of the story stands out. It is the reference to homosexual sex in an ISIS training camp. The observers said he saw men having sex with other men behind the tents in the desert night. Interestingly, Islamic history shows that nowhere in the Quran is homosexuality ever explicitly condemned. Until the modern era, in fact, there was no word for sodomy in Arabic or Persian, nor is there any prohibition of it in the Quran. Is that shocking to you? Islam is a homosexual religion. Just like the ancient Nazis of Germany and Hitler and his Nazis, the Nazi Empire was a homosexual empire, run by homosexuals for homosexuals. Just read the book, The Pink Swastika, and you'll have all the evidence you want to look at. And the final chapter in that book shows how the pink swastika has mutated and transported itself to America. Now we have homosexuality flourishing in America, ripe and ready for the Muslim conquest. Muhammad, history tells us, in fact, he himself wore the clothes of his child bride, Aisha, as a ritual to receive revelation from his God, Allah. In the Hadith number 2442, chapter 52, Muhammad says, "The revelation does not come to me when I am in the garment of any woman except Aisha." Aisha was his young bride. Muhammad was about, I think, 50 years old when he married this young girl, very young girl, as one of his wives. And Hadith number 3941, Muhammad says, "Do not hurt me with Aisha, for by Allah the inspiration did not descend on me while I was in the coverings of any of you other women, except Aisha." He fell into his religious trances when he was dressed in his young wife's clothing. Something God Almighty forbids. God says women should not wear that which pertains to a man, and men should not wear that which pertains to women in the book of the law, in the Torah. But the followers of Muhammad consisted largely of mukanathun, which is an Arabic word for cross-dressers. It is the same word as mukanata, which in Arabic means homosexual. The mukanathum was sort of a male-female cross-dressing type. They existed, and they lived or worked in the household of the Prophet, Muhammad. Aisha, one of the Prophet's wives, indicated that these were men who worked in the household. They were mukanatun. That generally meant that they were not necessarily castrated, but they didn't have an interest in women. Why not? Because they were homosexuals. Muhammad was not only a cross-dresser, but he had gay friends. So Wally and Theodore Shobat say Islam wants to destroy Christianity and replace it with a heretical pagan homosexual empire. Do you see now why Obama is in love with Islam? When he himself is a homosexual and has homosexual liaisons? When he was a younger man in Chicago, in the Chicago bathhouses? He never has shown any real interest in women. He's not really fighting a war against the ISIS or the Muslims. I feel personally, brethren, he's in cahoots with them. It's all part of a great plan, a secret agenda. And we have been waltzed, mesmerized, transfixed by the glaring eyes of the cobra, hypnotized. According to Chris Kyle's father, Wayne Kyle, my wife and I saw the movie The American Sniper this past week, or a week ago. And in the movie, Wayne Kyle, the father of Chris Kyle, who became America's foremost sniper in Afghanistan, his father told his son there are 3 types of people in the world: sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs. He told him some people prefer to believe that evil doesn't exist in the world. And if it ever darkened their doorstep, they wouldn't know how to protect themselves. These people are the sheep. Then you got the predators. They use violence to prey upon the weak. They are the wolves. And then there are those who are blessed with the gift of aggression, an overpowering need to protect the flock. These men are the rare breed who live to confront the wolf. They are the sheepdog. Well, brethren, I am a sheepdog. I live to protect the flock and to warn about the wolves prowling around, seeking whom they may devour. And we need to wake up to the fact wolves are all around us. And the sheepdogs need to be barking and alert. Cry aloud, spare not, God says. Don't hush your voice. Don't simper and whine and disappear beneath the bed. Stand tall, stand strong, stand forth. Don't collapse. Don't fall down. This past week, when Prime Minister Netanyahu came before the American Congress and gave his wonderful speech, warning our people to wake up, to face the threat that's coming from Iran and the Muslim world, and 30 congressional senators refused to even show up and listen. Obama despised and ignored the summons from Netanyahu. After the speech, he ridiculed it, saying he heard nothing new, no new solutions. He wasn't listening. He wasn't paying attention. He didn't hear what he wanted to hear. Therefore, he just dismissed it and ignored it. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is standing forth today, like Winston Churchill stood forth in the 1930s, warning about the rising up of Hitler and Nazi Germany. And Churchill cried aloud in his political wilderness, the voice of one crying from the wilderness, about the dangers of Nazi Germany. And the world did not listen. And the British people did not listen. And America did not listen until Hitler attacked and invaded Poland. And suddenly the world woke up and called to arms. And Churchill was brought back into the British government from exile, from the wilderness, to take charge of the fight against Hitler. When Netanyahu is crying out the warning that World War III is beginning and giving Iran nuclear weapons is a shortcut to what Christ himself said in Matthew chapter 24, verse 21 and 22. Christ said that for then shall be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world, until this very time, no, nor ever shall be. He's talking about our time today. And unless those days were cut short, no flesh would be saved alive. Total annihilation. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. They will be cut short by the intervention of Jesus Christ. Almighty God, Yeshua the Messiah, is going to come and cut short the days to protect his people and save the world from utter destruction. In Malachi chapter 4. God says in verse 4, remember the law of Moses, my servant. Remember means to bring it back to mind and obey it. Think about it. Remember the law. Don't say it's done away with and cast off. Remember the law of Moses, the Torah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Study it. Obey it. Remember the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel, for all God's people. God gave the law with the statutes and the judgments. It was all given for Israel, for America and Great Britain, the descendants of the house of Jacob, and those who become Christians, because we are engrafted into the family tree of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then God says, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, and he will come and turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse. And the Hebrew there is lest I come and smite the earth with utter destruction. Well, God is going to intervene and cut short the days for the sake of his servants, the saints, his people, those who turn to him in the days ahead. We are living in the days of darkness, and the darkness is increasing. In an article I have from Red State, March 3, 2015, The author says, reading the news that the U.S. was preparing to cede control of the internet to the world community, that is, Red China, Russia, Iran, Syria, Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, et al., was at first a head-scratcher for me. Why? What's Obama doing? It makes no sense. He'll piss off even a lot of Democrats. He's not that stupid, the article says. That was soon followed by the aha moment. Now it all makes sense. A lot of sense, he says. What's the plan? What's the objective? What's the agenda? The article goes on. It's obvious that Obama loves campaigning. He's just not that into governing. He does, however, have one more campaign in him. He is now running for, or to be, the next Secretary General of the United Nations. Obama's term expires January 20, 2017. In case you hadn't noticed, the term of the current Secretary General of the United Nations expires on December 31, 2016. Just the previous month. What does the Secretary General do? Well, actually, pretty much nothing today. Gives a few speeches, chairs a few meetings, attends a lot of receptions and parties, and flies around the world a lot. The job comes with a lot of perks, including a 5-story townhouse on Sutton Place, lots of staff, and a practically unlimited budget. There's nothing well to govern. The UN Charter does not list any specific duties or responsibilities. No constitution to be concerned with. It's perfect for Obama. He can do what he wants. And let's not forget all those great golf courses in the metropolitan area. The UN Charter provides that the Secretary General will be appointed by the General Assembly upon recommendation of the Security Council. All as the 5 permanent members of the Security Council all have veto powers. So Obama has to get the approval of Russia and China, and he's in. Think about that. Now do you wonder why Obama's been cozying up to Putin in Russia? Now do you understand why he said on an open, hot mic a few months or a year ago that Putin hadn't seen anything yet, but that Obama would have greater flexibility in his second term? You now know why he's kowtowing to the Red Chinese? Historically, the article says, in Red State, the job of Secretary General usually went to a neutral or third world power. Like during the Cold War era, the U.S. and the USSR would veto anyone from the opposite faction. And if there are any murmurs of opposition to Obama, well, look for Obama to fess up that, hey, he's really Kenyan after all. He really was born in Kenya. And thus he's really a third worlder. Thus, Obama could, in an instant, turn things around, and by being Secretary General, he could put the United Nations on the front page. All he has to do is win the support of Russia and Red China. The U.S., Britain, and France will support him, let's face it. No one would dare oppose Obama. Not any American president, not even Jeb Bush. Certainly not Hillary Clinton. Obama is sitting in the catbird seat. Allow Red China's massive military buildup to go unopposed. He's done that. Pulling back U.S. forces from the Pacific. He's doing that. Reduce our ability to project force around the world. He's done that. Obama is allowing the Chinese to dominate Asia and the region. Libya, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Ukraine. Putin could ask for anything. Could Putin ask for anything more than what Obama's allowing him to get away with? They'd welcome Obama as Secretary General. And now, what's Obama's plan and his administration? We're handing over control of the internet to the bad guys. That will win him more votes. Obama told Putin that he'd have more flexibility after the election. He has surely demonstrated that. Ask yourself, why would the Russians and the Red Chinese oppose Obama as the next Secretary General? He's giving them all they could ask for now. What more could they want? And as for Obama, it's a perfect fit. Even more than that, it's the ideal job description for him. After all, what's this guy going to do next? He's young. Too young to retire to Hawaii and just play golf. Teach law? Nah. Lecture? That's not in him. He can't be a senior statesman for the Democratic Party. By the time he leaves office, the Democrats will be an electoral wasteland, having lost control of Congress and the White House. He will have succeeded, wildly so, in fundamentally transforming the Democratic Party and America. Simply put, he said there's no room for Obama and Clinton on the same stage. What's Barry going to do? Another global initiative? Nope. But the guy does have a monstrous ego, laced with narcissism, that needs an outlet. Remember the Greek pillars? The vow to make the oceans obey his commands? Remember his inauguration and the temple of Jupiter at his convention where he was crowned the Democratic candidate? Obama needs a stage. He needs a platform. Where better could he be than at the UN, ruling the world? Ruling the world from the United Nations.
What happened to the
Daniel chapter 8. God says, verse 23, and in the latter time of their kingdom, the end of the age where we're living today, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, when wickedness and iniquity and sin are bubbling over around the world, spurting forth like a fountain of evil, at that time a king shall arise, a king having fierce features, a fierce countenance, anger in his eyes, who understands sinister schemes, plots and agendas, manifestos, who plots like a fox, wily and conniving. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. It sounds like a new Secretary General of the United Nations with all the nations behind him. All the nations giving them his power. He shall destroy fearfully, or extraordinarily destroy, and prosper and thrive. Obama's not afraid to destroy. He sends forth drones to punish his enemies, and they may take out, in one case, 1,200 innocent civilians just to get one terrorist. He shall destroy and prosper and thrive, and destroy the mighty and the holy people. Through his cunning, being wily like a fox, he shall cause deceit, deception, mendacity to prosper under his rule. The lawless will be victorious. Wickedness and deceit will thrive. The lies will proliferate under his rule, under his hand. And he shall exalt himself in his heart, and he shall destroy many in their prosperity. Thinking they're prosperous, he's going to take them down. He shall even rise up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken finally, without human means, by the stone from heaven, by the returning Messiah, by Jesus Christ himself. And Daniel is told in verse 26, the vision of the mornings and the evenings which was told is true. Therefore seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. Yes, brethren, it refers to our day. We're living in the time of the end. We're living in the generation at the close. Daniel chapter 12 says of our time, there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. But your people shall be delivered, everyone written in the book. This is the time of the end. This is the crisis at the close. Let's wake up. Let's smell the coffee. Brethren, let's prepare our hearts to meet the Lord as he comes in the air. And so we shall ever be with the Lord. God help us. Amen.